And so this is actually, I just want to set Dallas up by saying here, this is intended to be thoughtful, that this is a seminar that's intended to make us think and to actually, especially speak to those of you who are leaders of one sort or another in the church and have some role in teaching, that we could think through the importance of that and the importance of teaching in the church. So I don't want to waste any more of Dallas's time. We're going to give Dallas about an hour here, 55, 60 minutes to just teach, and then we'll have some time for interaction, and I'll come around the room with the microphone, and we can ask Dallas some questions. But welcome, Dallas Willard.
Thank you. I had never heard the story of how I got to be invited down to do this. But I am delighted to be here, and thank you for coming. I always feel a little presumption in standing up and speaking to pastors because it's been a long time since I pastored in an official way. But I think of myself in that context always, where I am and what I do. Still, I come to you not to offer you a snappy program for something or other, but to talk to you about a word that Jesus left with us, and to ask you, do you think we should do that, and how might we best go about it? I'm hoping that everyone has a handout. Is anyone missing one? Do we have any left? If you are, I think it's helpful to have something in writing if you're going to say some stuff that might not be so easily taken in. So I will not read this, but I will talk my way through it. So I began here by saying that in signing over his work to his first friends, Jesus told them and us to teach gathered disciples to observe, and that doesn't mean to watch. It means to keep, to hold to carry out everything he had commanded. Now, everything doesn't leave out very much, does it? So that's a pretty comprehensive teaching. We don't have to do it all at once, and actually if we could just do a few things that he commanded, it probably would make a great deal of difference. And my first question to you is, what are we to do about this? Do you, as a leader, teacher, speaker, do you believe that we should teach people to do everything that Jesus commanded? Yes. It would be hard to say no, wouldn't it? Now, if you say yes, then we should do that. So now I would ask you a next question and to think about, is that what we do? Do we actually teach people to do everything that Jesus commanded? Now, not just teach that they ought to. That's sort of the easy version. And probably somehow we do that. People kind of come away with the idea that they ought to do what Jesus said. And the effect of that often is a great deal of guilt for not doing it. But actually, I think what we're talking about here is not teaching people that they ought to do what Jesus said, but teaching them in such a way that they actually do it. Now, that would be observing or keeping his commandments. And in that respect, I think we might have to say we don't do that. Maybe we hope for that. We hope it will happen, and when someone seems to have come there, we are very happy and thankful. But we don't expect that to be the usual outcome of our services and activities in our church. Let me add on to that there are many people who think you cannot do it, that you cannot teach people to do the things that Jesus said. And there are various reasons for this. But I think if you candidly look at what we do, you may find that we don't try to do that. A couple of years ago, I was in another country where they had a lot of conflict between Protestants and Catholics. And neighbors frequently blew neighbors up. And I was teaching in the Sermon on the Mount about loving your enemies. And these were wonderful people. Just precious leaders, and they were really people who loved Jesus. But one man stood up and said, "This loving your enemies, you maybe don't know who our enemies are and what they've done to us, and we don't think that we can do that." Now, I didn't think I should just say to him, "Oh, yes, you can." That's not a very helpful response. So instead, I ask the question, is anyone teaching you how to do that? How would you love your enemy? And a moment of silence and thoughtful reflection, and the response was, no. No one is teaching us how to do that. Teaching us in a way that we wanted to love our enemy, and we're actually able to love our enemy. Teaching us in a way that we would actually understand what that means. What does it mean to love your enemy? What are you doing to your enemy when you love them? And all of those are matters that need to be cleared up. And with reference to all of the teachings of Jesus, that's the way it is. If you begin to urge someone, for example, to live free of anger, you have to do some explaining. You have to help people understand what anger is, where it comes from, what it does, what you give up when you give up on it, whether or not you can live without it, or would you possibly just stop breathing if you couldn't be angry. And the teachings of Jesus about lusting, about keeping your words where they just say yes or no, and don't say no's that are yeses and yeses that are no's. See, that's something you have to learn. And my thought is, and I will certainly receive your rebuke on anything that I have to say, and we'll have time for that. My thought is we don't teach people in that way. That our activities are not really set up to do that. And sometimes it goes very deep theologically. Sometimes you find that people have views of grace that make you think you should be passive and should do nothing lest you threaten God's sovereignty. And so there's a lot of theology in the background, and you may want to work on some of this when we come to the question time. But I'm afraid we have to say that you will walk many a mile before you find a church that is committed to teaching people in a way that they actually do the things that Jesus said.